There is a point in life where the entire game of attraction changes, and it often happens after 40. The rules that once worked no longer hold power. The charm that could easily pull attention in youth begins to fade, and suddenly men realize that women are seeing them with different eyes. They are no longer impressed by surface looks, flashy lifestyle, or smooth lines. Instead, they are scanning for something deeper, something hidden beneath layers of personality. This shift is silent but powerful, and many men are unprepared for it. Why does a woman over 40 evaluate a man so differently from a woman in her 20s? Why does the same gesture that once seemed attractive now appear shallow? It is not random, it is psychological. Women at this stage have lived through enough experiences, heartbreaks, and betrayals to filter through masks. They value stability over show, emotional intelligence over charm, and quiet strength over loud displays. The frightening part is that if a man does not adapt to these new rules, he becomes invisible to her. If you are ready to understand the hidden rules of attraction after 40, then stay with me, because what follows may completely reshape how you see women and yourself. When a man crosses into his 40s, he often assumes that attraction works the same way it did in his 20s or 30s. He may believe that women will still be impressed by his looks, his sense of humor, or his ability to spend freely. Yet, what he does not realize is that the rules have shifted, and the old game has quietly expired. A woman in her 40s has lived through enough illusions to no longer be moved by surface-level tricks. She has heard every clever line, seen every careless attempt to impress, and endured enough disappointment to recognize patterns quickly. The charm that once gave a man instant attention may now appear immature or even desperate in her eyes. This shift is not random. It is a psychological recalibration that comes with experience. Women who reach this stage of life carry memories of relationships that failed, promises that were broken, and moments where they invested trust only to have it shattered. These experiences sharpen their filters. They no longer chase sparks that burn out quickly. Instead, they are scanning for consistency, emotional safety, and the type of strength that does not fade with time. It is not about being impressed for a moment. It is about being reassured for the long run. The mistake many men make is trying to replay the old game. They exaggerate their success, try to appear younger, or overcompensate with attention and gifts. To a younger woman, this might appear flattering, but to a woman over 40, it often feels hollow. She can sense the gap between performance and authenticity. Her instincts are sharper now, and she can read insecurity faster than most men realize. What once worked as attraction now works as a warning sign. The very effort that a man believes makes him desirable may expose him as unprepared for her new expectations. This is why so many men feel invisible at this stage. They approach women with the same energy they used years ago, only to be met with silence, rejection, or polite distance. They assume the problem is age, when in truth the problem is adaptation. Attraction is not about competing with younger men. It is about evolving into a different type of presence that younger men cannot fake. A man who refuses to change is not rejected because he is older. He is rejected because he is outdated. Think of it as moving into a different arena. The lights are dimmer, the stakes are higher, and the audience is no longer entertained by tricks. They want depth, not distraction. They want a man who has weathered storms, not one who is pretending he never faced them. If a man steps into this new arena with the same old mask, he will not only fail to impress, he will disappear entirely from her consideration. The rules of attraction after 40 are not just different. They are merciless to those who ignore them. By the time a woman reaches her 40s, her ability to read people is no longer a guess. It is a survival skill sharpened by years of trial, error, and recovery. Every disappointment, every betrayal, and every false promise has shaped a radar inside her that scans without effort. She does not need to investigate a man's words, she feels the truth behind them. This emotional radar is why so many men struggle to get past her walls. What once sounded charming now sounds rehearsed. What once seemed bold now feels insecure. She is not harder to impress because she has grown bitter. She is harder to impress because she has learned to see through the illusion. Younger women often get caught up in the sparkle of attention, the adrenaline of pursuit, and the thrill of validation. Middle-aged women, however, recognize patterns instantly. A man who speaks too fast about his success is often trying to cover a fragile core. A man who overexplains his intentions is usually hiding doubts about himself. A man who tries too hard to prove he is different is already showing that he is not. She does not need weeks to figure this out. It happens within moments, often in silence, long before the man even realizes she has reached her conclusion. This level of perception comes with both protection and cost. It protects her from wasting energy on men who are not ready to give something real. But it also means her standards rise higher, sometimes beyond what most men are willing to meet. She is not looking for endless excitement anymore, she is looking for alignment. She wants emotional steadiness, not chaos. She values honesty more than flattery, because flattery has betrayed her before. She respects strength, but not the kind that shouts loudly. She respects the kind of strength that stays calm when the world gets difficult. Here is where many men fail. They confuse this radar with cynicism. They think she has built walls that cannot be broken, when in fact she has built walls that require a different type of key. A younger woman might accept charm as proof of value. A middle-aged woman demands character as proof of worth. She does not just want to know how a man treats her in moments of fun, she wants to see how he handles stress, conflict, and discomfort. This is where her perception becomes ruthless, because she knows that temporary attraction means nothing without emotional safety. To a man who has not evolved, this radar feels unfair. He may complain that women are too demanding, too cold, or too guarded. But the truth is simpler. These women have already paid the price of being impressed by the wrong man. They are not interested in paying it again. They are not impressed by noise, because they have already seen how noise can turn into silence when responsibility appears. Their radar has been trained by pain, but it now guides them toward protection. A man who does not understand this will continue to approach with the wrong tools, and he will continue to fail before he even begins. By the time attraction rules change after 40, charm begins to lose its crown. A smile, a witty comment, a clever joke, these might have opened doors in the past, but now they barely create a spark. What matters more is whether a man can offer stability without suffocating her freedom. Women at this stage of life have learned that excitement without foundation collapses fast, and passion without direction burns itself out. They have lived through promises that vanished overnight, through relationships that began with fireworks but ended in ashes. The game has changed because their lives have changed. A younger woman might be dazzled by the man who seems untouchable, mysterious, or hard to read. But a woman in her 40s has no patience for endless guessing. She has responsibilities, perhaps children, financial goals, or simply the awareness that time is not to be wasted. She wants to know if a man can stand beside her, not just impress her. She watches how he spends his time, how he reacts when life does not go as planned, how he carries himself when there is no audience. These quiet details reveal more than grand gestures ever could. The stability she looks for is not only about money, though financial responsibility does play its part. It is about emotional steadiness. A man who loses control easily, who explodes under pressure, or who cannot handle rejection with grace becomes a red flag immediately. She has lived long enough to know that instability is contagious. It drains energy, destroys peace, and spreads chaos through every corner of life. This is why the confident yet calm man begins to stand out. He does not need to compete for attention, because his presence alone creates safety. He does not need to brag about what he has done, because his actions speak louder than his words. Attraction after 40 thrives on consistency. A man who says one thing but does another will fail quickly, because she notices every gap between words and actions. She does not want perfection, she wants alignment. She respects flaws when they are admitted openly, but she rejects masks that hide weakness behind arrogance. What pulls her closer is not the promise of eternal fun, but the reassurance that she can rely on him when the world turns heavy. In her eyes, stability is not boring. It is rare. It is the kind of rare that becomes priceless once she has survived instability before. This is why some men feel invisible to women of this age. They still approach with the same strategies that worked in their 20s, only to discover that the rules have changed. A clever line, a smooth compliment, or a display of status cannot compete with the quiet strength of a man who remains grounded no matter what. The more he tries to impress with shallow tricks, the more she pulls away. She has learned that performance fades, but character stays. The men who understand this shift do not chase with charm. They attract with presence. When attraction moves beyond the surface, it becomes clear that appearances have far less weight than they once did. By the time a woman reaches her 40s, beauty is not the shining armor that blinds her judgment. She has lived long enough to know that a handsome face cannot guarantee kindness, and a sculpted body cannot promise loyalty. The magnetic pull of youth fades, and in its place grows a deeper hunger for values. A man who stands for something, who lives with purpose rather than drifting, becomes far more compelling than one who relies only on looks. She now notices the way a man treats others when there is nothing to gain. She listens not only to what he says, but how he says it, and what he chooses to stay silent about. She observes how he spends his evenings, whether in growth or in waste. These small but telling details create a map of his inner world, and it is that inner world that begins to matter most. To a woman who has experienced broken promises and shallow games, there is nothing more attractive than a man whose actions reflect his values. The men who continue to chase attention through surface-level attraction find themselves lost at this stage. Their efforts appear hollow because she has grown resistant to empty charm. A younger woman may be caught in the glitter of appearance, but a woman over 40 looks for the substance behind the mask. She is drawn to maturity not because it is serious, but because it feels safe. It reassures her that the man standing before her is not a boy dressed as a man, but someone who has learned from his battles and carries those lessons with quiet strength. Legacy also enters the conversation in ways younger men rarely expect. She thinks about the long term, what kind of mark a man will leave, how he will impact the people around him, what kind of stability he can bring to a shared life. He does not need to be wealthy or famous, but he must have a direction. Drift, laziness, or aimless living are repellents. Purpose, no matter how simple, is magnetic. A man who teaches others, who creates, who protects, who builds something of meaning, these qualities shine brighter than any youthful charm could. As she evaluates men, she begins to filter out the noise. The loud gestures, the constant attempts to impress, the shallow words, all of these only highlight what is missing underneath. She is looking for the man who does not need to force attraction, because his character speaks in silence. His maturity shows not in what he says, but in what he refuses to lower himself into. That restraint, that self-control, feels rare. And rarity always creates desire. Attraction, once defined by appearance, has now become a mirror of values and maturity. This is why men who cling only to their looks or charm lose power, while those who build themselves from within grow more magnetic with age. When men reach this stage of life, they face a choice that decides everything about their future with women. Some refuse to adapt. They cling to the old rules of attraction, hoping that charm, looks, or quick gestures will be enough. They ignore the fact that women no longer respond to surface illusions in the same way. These men grow frustrated, bitter, even resentful, wondering why their efforts fail. But the truth is simple, women after 40 are playing a different game. Only those who evolve with the game remain relevant. For the men who choose growth, everything changes. They begin to understand that attraction is no longer about chasing approval but about building an unshakable foundation within themselves. They invest in their health, not to compete with younger men, but to protect their vitality. They strengthen their minds through discipline, reading, learning, and reflection. They master their emotions, refusing to be ruled by anger or insecurity. They know that every weakness will be tested by women who have seen enough to spot a man's cracks instantly. By working on themselves, they close those cracks before anyone else can expose them. At this stage, power comes not from being loud, but from being calm. It comes from being the man who does not flinch under pressure, who does not beg for attention, who does not collapse when faced with rejection. A woman in her 40s sees this stability as rare and magnetic because she knows how rare it is to find a man who carries himself like stone while others crumble. That calm presence becomes more attractive than any smooth line or temporary charm. Men who thrive after 40 also understand the art of mystery. They no longer reveal everything too quickly. They let silence do the work that words cannot. They create depth by keeping a part of themselves hidden, allowing women to discover layers over time. Younger men often overshare in a rush to impress, but older men who understand psychology know that curiosity fuels desire more than any confession ever could. The greatest shift, however, is how these men view themselves. They stop living in the shadow of youth and embrace the power that only experience gives. They stop chasing validation and instead attract it by becoming men of purpose. They stop fearing age and start wielding it like a weapon, knowing that maturity is more appealing than any boyish charm could ever be. Women notice this transformation instantly. They are drawn not because the man tries to please them, but because he no longer needs to. This is why attraction rules after 40 belong only to those who adapt. Women see men differently because they themselves have changed. They demand more, expect more, and respect less easily. The men who resist this reality fall into bitterness. The men who embrace it rise into a class of their own. So the question is simple: which man will you become, the one who fights to hold onto fading tricks, or the one who evolves, grows, and earns the respect and desire of women who no longer settle for anything less than strength, depth, and maturity?